Well, welcome to this March meeting of the Connecticut Municipal Light Board. Um, we're happy to have you all here, and we'll start with minutes. We have one set of minutes to deal with. John.
Yeah, I had distributed minutes for our February 12th meeting, and if there are no edits, Warren had picked up a typo in the edits, which had been addressed. But if there are no additional edits, I move that the board approve the February 12th minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, and Brian,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. So thank you very much. We will go on to the next item on our agenda. And that's the chair's report. And the most important news on the chair's report is that we have a new board member filling out our fifth spot. It's Chris Schaffner. And Chris has not been officially sworn in, so he's going to be listening today and not voting on anything. But Chris, I'd like to give you a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and tell everybody about your interesting and very relevant experience for this board.
Thank you, Warren. So I'm Chris Schaffner. I moved to Concord in 2012. I live in the West Concord area. I also am a business owner in Concord. I run a company called The Green Engineer. We're based in the Bradford Mill. There are 25 of us, and we do green building consulting. My background is as a mechanical engineer. I'm a PE in Massachusetts, and I've spent most of my career working on the building systems for commercial buildings, making them energy efficient. And a particular experience in the last 15 years or so working with the Mass Save program and incentives, as well as on our project work with a number of munis. Projects that our firm has done include the Walden Pond Visitor Center. So that's the kind of projects we like to be able to do. I'm really happy to be here, and this is my first experience volunteering for the town of Concord, although in my previous to moving to Concord, I was in Acton and was one of the co-founders of the Green Advisory Board in Acton, and also served on the planning board there for a number of years. And I think Warren and I crossed paths back in those days as part of ACES, I believe, right?
Yes, yes.
Which was the a nonprofit entity that was working with the W.R. Grace Superfund cleanup.
Yeah. Great. Well, welcome. It'll be good to have you on the board. I have one other board matter that's slightly awkward, to see if anybody wants to help me serve on the monthly chairs meetings that take place here in Concord. There's meeting of the chairs of all the boards. It can be done virtually, it could be done in person, and it's a chairs breakfast. It's like from 8:30 to 9:30. And everybody goes around the room and says what's up on their board. And I often have conflicts with work in it and can't attend. And then the second, which is the awkward part, and the true confessions, is everybody seems to love these meetings except me. Um, and because everybody goes around and reports very briefly, and I think it's silly to get 25 people in a room and not give anybody a chance to ask questions or say anything. So I find it frustrating, but I've learned that most people really like these meetings and they are interesting. So you don't have to do it now, but if anybody wants to occasionally sit in on one of these meetings and take my place, I'd appreciate it because I can't always attend. So with that, let me know afterwards if you have some interest. With that, let me turn it over to Jason for the director's report.
Thank you, Warren. Welcome, Chris and everyone. So first, I want to start off by mentioning that Rick Rogers, one of our 3 customer service specialists, has left to return to Hudson, his hometown, to work at their light plant. Rick did work here for 2.5 years, and we're really grateful for his service to the light plant and wish him the best. We have begun recruitment for that position, and to date, at least yesterday, we had 131 applicants. So no shortage of people who are interested, but that's a lot of work to do for Carol and Donna. So I appreciate their help in weeding through the resumes, and we're hoping to have schedule some interviews soon. On the good news front for recruitment, I'm happy to mention that we've sent HR 2 requests to make a job offer for 3rd-class line workers. Who've been targeting 1st-class line workers for a very long time, and it's been incredibly difficult to recruit from this incredibly small body of people in the state and country who know how to do this work at such a high level. A lot of the bigger munis have been building their pipeline and have the resources to train people from the ground up, and that's been challenging with a smaller crew. So, but the team is in a place where they feel like they can take on 2 new 3rd-class line workers. These people come quite prepared relative to some of the folks who have been applying in the past, where they really come, maybe they've changed an outlet or something in the wall, and they think they like electricity, and so they like to be a line worker. These people are very qualified and have already done a lot of training and in some case schooling, and I think they're going to be a great fit. So we're excited to bring these people on to help fill out the line crew. And they would be going through the NEPA training, which is several years, along with getting on the job training with the current staff, the line crew leaders and the 1st-class line workers. So we're excited about that. The other 2 vacancies that remains on the electric side are the equipment line operator, which we plan on filling and recruiting actively after the line worker recruitment ends, and then the financial manager, which hopefully we're moving in the positive direction on that position as well. I wanted to zoom out a little bit and look kind of big picture. We often are focused on the light plant, but we've gotten a lot of emails and correspondence in the last week or so inquiring about the status of Canadian tariffs and the impact on electricity rates. We are planning on posting something on the webpage so that we can point people to a statement, because it's not an easy answer that rates won't go up or rates are going to go up a lot. So there's some nuance here. So we want to make sure we craft a message and deal with this carefully. But I wanted to just give an update to the board and the people who might be watching or attending this meeting right now. So we have 2 different exposures for the Canadian market. One is the spot market, which is basically any electricity we haven't entered into a contract ahead of time is purchased on the spot market. You're basically paying like real-time pricing based on supply and demand for power. And then we have a contract that actually does include some Quebec hydro. And so in the spot market, we typically have contracted about 80% or more of our power. And so we're only buying about 20% on the spot market. And of the spot market, the ISO New England has said that over the past 5 years, Canadian imports have been about 11% of what they have been providing. So we can use those numbers to figure out, if there's a 10% or 25% increase, what would the impact be? So a 10% tariff, let's say the spot price is about $70 a megawatt. We might see that go to $70.77 because again, it's 10% on the 11% of that. And then if it's 25%, it might go to $81.93. And so what does that mean to the average person? So if you look at the number of megawatt hours we typically buy on the spot market, that's about a $30,000 to $77,000 increase for a year period. So it's not nothing, but we typically, like this year, we forecasted to buy about $23 million of power. So that alone is probably not likely to trigger a PCA or power cost adjustment, and a need for us to collect more, money on rates. So it's definitely an impact. And if you look at it system wide, it's millions of dollars, but relative to, our exposure, it's pretty small there. For the other contract, I'm not even going to get into pricing because right now, the delivery point for our Quebec Hydro is in Massachusetts. So we basically take it from there, and we have to pay the government fees and tariffs added from the delivery point, which is already across the border. So right now, the supplier of that energy generator is actually going to be on the hook for any increases that have to do with, commerce across the border. So right now, we feel, pretty good that exposure is non-existent. So I just wanted to mention that, and we usually take questions at the end, but I'm happy to answer more questions if people have them. Another thing I wanted to mention was the Mass Save program, which, Concord has not opted into the Mass Save program, but we do closely mirror its rebates and incentives. The governor has announced a $500 million reduction in Mass Save over the next 3 years, primarily in response to very high, energy bills, mainly on the gas side. But while we do not adopt those programs, we look to them very closely. So we'll be looking at our programs and impacts. We set our rates back in December and forecasted for the year. And so we don't really anticipate many changes as a result of that. But, we're sensitive to the fact that there are pressures on people on their utility bills, and that we have to be mindful of the impacts of these programs. So in some great news, I want to just mention that this Saturday on March 15th, there is another Green Homes Tour where people who are interested in things like heat pumps and weatherization changes can actually tour some homes where Concordians have made some updates and changes, and they can ask questions about some of these systems and what the costs were and things like that. There's an easy URL to get there. It's concordma.gov/greenhomes, all one word. If you go there, you can sign up and attend one of these visits. So I encourage everybody who's interested to do that. Today actually is the last day that we're working with our contractor Hercules on installing the new advanced meters. After that, we'll have just about 50 left in the town, and our internal staff will handle those. And I really can't thank the team enough. I know Carol and Donna are here, Joe and his team have helped as well, but the metering team and our consultants have done such a great job at getting these meters out very quickly. So I'm grateful for that. Tree trimming is about 50% complete at this point. So, we will likely meet our goal of getting this done before the 250th, but if not, we'll definitely pause for a little bit and come back afterward. Next week, all staff will be doing CPR, first aid, and AED training. This is important for us as we try to, we definitely are focused on safety operationally, but we really need to be focused on safety for all employees. And so we're trying to roll out organization-wide safety program for everyone. And this is just another thing that we're doing to try to make sure that everybody is aware of the safety implications here in the office. The SCADA system is fully procured, and we expect to have kickoff meetings soon once we get into the next phase of that. So thank you to Joe and his team who've done a tremendous amount of work to get here. Once we have ideas on timing, we'll definitely report that out. We just completed an infrared survey of our overhead system and a couple underground areas. And this was one of the recommendations from the Aegis findings. And I really credit Joe and his team for taking this up and doing the analysis here, but we basically got a very detailed report. And what this shows is just areas where insulation is failing, and conductors maybe are touching where they shouldn't, or other pieces of equipment are old, or wind has knocked things loose. And so there's basically heat where there shouldn't be heat, and the heat is usually a sign of something not going well. And so basically what this allows us to do is put all those on an action item list and prioritize them and investigate every single one. And, some of these might be fine for 5 years, you never know, and others may result in a transformer failing or a conductor failing, and, it would just be an outage or another issue. And some of these could lead to fire or other problems. So it's just another thing that we're doing proactively to make sure that we provide reliable electricity for all of our residents and businesses in town. I'm not going to get into too many details, but just know that we've been very involved in the 250th preparations. Joe and Mike, our line supervisor, Mike, have been attending the biweekly meetings. I've been going to the Emergency Operations Center activations, and we have those every week until the 19th of April. And we are preparing internally on our responses for maybe some difficult and challenging situations if there's an outage in the downtown area where there's going to be many, many people gathered. And then lastly, just wanted to thank staff for their response last Friday. We had a really a bad high wind event, and it resulted in a lot of very small issues. I think the biggest was an outage of maybe 8 or 9 customers. Big tree came down over there, but there were maybe 20 issues that were just small. Some of them are, limbs on power lines, or trees that came down that didn't take down stuff, but we had to clean up. The crew was in until I think 9 or 9:30 on Friday, and then came in on Saturday to clean up some other things and reconnect people, and then had more cleanup on Monday. So one of those things that for most people, hopefully it went unnoticed, but the crew was very busy on that, and I thank them all for that. And that's the end of my update.
Hey, thank you. Any questions or comments? A lot going on.
Brian.
So it's a great update. The wind event, I'm really pleasantly surprised with how few interruptions of service we had. I know next to me, I had a 100-year-old pine tree come crashing down, and we had a lot of branches in my neighborhood that went down, but I didn't see anybody losing power, and that's the tree trimming and keeping up with it, and the quick response. So that was great. The mass save is in the news, and there is cuts to the program, but I think the reason rates are going up is more about the fuel cost and delivery fees that are being charged. And I think mass save is kind of a scapegoat, but it's our programs are separate from that. We've got good programs, and as long as they're not having a dramatic impact on rates, I think they're worthwhile to get people to electrify and fuel switch. What was the other topics? In your update, you talked about the Inflation Reduction Act money and the potential of changes there, and you've got people watching to keep us informed of that. That's great. I'm glad to hear that hasn't been impacted yet. And yes, communication on tariffs. I don't know specifically what the import tariffs are because the news is happening pretty quick. But you had mentioned, if there was a 10% tariff or 20% tariff, I would, when in any communication with the public, I'd theorize a 50% tariff. And then when it turns out to be 10%, you're in a better position, because I think we are contracted and insulated from that action pretty well. But it's in the news, so we've got to communicate it. And the Green Home Tours is awesome. I hope that we have good attendance for that, and I've seen it communicated in many channels, and that's great. That means the word is getting out. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
I just wanted to say thank you, Jason and the team. My parents had a big pine tree that came down, took out their power. As I've experienced prior in situations, the team was out there quickly. They restored power quickly. A pretty big, really massive tree, right? So, and so you have two really happy customers that they got power back before dark. So thank you for that.
And Chris Schaffner, let me point out that Cameron is our select board representative on the at Light Board meetings, and we're pleased to have him attend. Let's go on to the broadband report. I don't see Dale here. Are you giving
Yeah,
this?
I'm going to give this one. It's a smaller report, and I didn't really need Dale to come in for this, as he was working late on something last night. So I wanted to update the board on the residential retrofit. This is a grant opportunity from the Mass Broadband Institute, where we are hopefully going to be able to see some grant funding come in to allow us to bring fiber the last mile to some low-income housing in Concord. There are 4 properties. They were not listed on the latest round in the grant. But Dale has actually been working with the Housing Authority to try to help them get all their documents submitted to the state so that they can be eligible in the next round, and they've done that, so that's exciting. This would provide 100% of the costs for the last mile in Concord to some of the Concord Housing Authority buildings. And so we are we obtaining quotes and preparing our filing for that, and we'll keep the board updated on how that shakes out and when, if they're announced in the next round of funding for that. The team has been working on the new 10 gig replacement of equipment bid, and we should have that advertised in the newspaper soon, so we can go out for procurement on that. Again, a lot of help with the 250th. We're looking at adding wireless access points to poles and areas where we already have smart gateways to provide coverage for kind of the first responders and mobile EOC that we're going to have out there. They have spliced in the school's permanent fiber. The school, you know, the new middle school has been moving from the old Sanborn building to the new middle school, and they needed a couple fibers very early on for their building control systems, and then one for data services back to their the Ripley school. But they've cut over fully now so that all the fiber on the old building can be decommissioned, and they have all the fiber that they need to get the school up and running, and the team has done a great job on that. We spent some time moving fiber on for some road work projects and developments that are going on Main Street and other places. And then, as I mentioned last month, our one of our senior network engineers had left, and so we've been working on recruitment for a second network engineer, and that's going well. We've had almost as many applicants as for the customer service. The tech industry seems to be going through a bit of a shakeup, and this may be good for us because we're seeing a lot of really qualified applicants. It's just a matter of weeding through. I think Dale said he had 50 strong candidates, and it's like, how do you get through 50? That's a lot of interviews. So anyway, that's all we have for the broadband update.
Great. Thank you. Any comments or questions for Jason on broadband? Brian?
A couple. So on the hiring front, the governor has created a Fed Up program, which is aimed at getting all those federal workers that are being let go, show them the opportunities we have here in Massachusetts and the local government and other areas. So I think that would be a great thing to connect with, make sure that our positions are posted there and so forth. On the rebate front for the Housing Authority, we have subsidies for rate assistance from the electric side. And those same customers will probably qualify for some kind of help getting the last mile to those properties. It would be nice to know a cost estimate to estimate what a program to bring the last mile and get those homes connected to broadband would be, such that if they don't receive the rebate, or if we decide to expand the program to other groups that we feel need the assistance, what that would look like. That's just something to look at for a future meeting, but that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else? Well, let's go on to our next agenda topic. At the last couple of meetings, we've been talking about what the customer bills will look like once we transition to time of use rates, and there's an update on where that stands with the vendor who has to program and prepare the bills.
Yes. Thank you, Warren. That was a good tee up. You're becoming very good at that. It's like I don't need to say anything. So we wanted to just summarize kind of where we are on this process with the board and make sure we had an opportunity for any last minute changes. We feel pretty good that we have an action plan where we've retained some of the flexibility that the board had wished us to retain in the process after the last meeting. So we, the decision was made to kind of set aside the idea of a solar tariff, a flat rate that we'd be crediting solar production in excess of consumption at a home or business. Well, these are all residential, so home. And that we would either be compensating solar on a time of use bucket basis, so aligning perfectly with the consumption rates and time of use periods that we determine, or one that's even more complex and maybe has more or different time periods. So we wanted to retain that possibility. So we did have a call with our vendor, NISC, and we spoke to the implementation manager of the advanced metering stuff, and he said he did some research and came back and he said that that does seem possible. They basically have something called register sets, and a register set is something within a single rate that allows you to program a time period and a dollar value for advanced metering. So with 15 register sets, we would basically need 5 for time of use itself, because we might have 3 in the warmer months and 2 in the colder months, and they might not be the same periods. So we would have 10 additional that we could be using throughout the thing. Now, we're not proposing we use 10. They're just saying that their software allows for that quantity. So it seems to allow that. So the rabbit hole we're in now is because we haven't decided which way we're going, either keeping the 2 or 3 for time of use or doing something a little bit more complex, we just need to figure out, because on the actual bill, they need spacing for different things to appear. So if we do end up with 4, 5, or more buckets for when we compensate solar, that we have the space on the bill to put that data, and that the programming and logic of the software can be looking for these different time periods. So we'll clarify that, but we feel pretty good that this is going to be possible. The other thing that we asked them about was the graph. Right now it's showing temperature, and there was a request for heating and cooling degree days. And after some research, they came back and said that that was also data that they have an API for to get that data, and that should be able to put that on the bill. And so that was positive. And I have created a spreadsheet with all the decisions that we've made so far, what meeting where we decided them, and which ones are complete and which ones are kind of partial. And really, the 2 that we have as partial complete are the solar compensation, which our action item is to retain flexibility as long as we can and come back to the board if we need a decision. But right now, we're retaining that flexibility. And then on the collapsing, the separate distribution, capacity transmission energy charges, the guidance that we have is capacity transmission and energy can be collapsed. Distribution, for the variable distribution that we're charging per kilowatt hour, we feel like the guidance was based on Brian's mock-up that we separate that out for visibility for solar if we end up charging or crediting in that way. So everything else in terms of the meter fee and the fixed distribution cost and the framing kilowatt hours and dollars and cents, the QR code, the stacked bar graphs, all that stuff, we feel like we're in a pretty good position. I don't think we have a critical need for the board to weigh in on something now, but I did just want to summarize that and give the board the opportunity to clarify anything that they need clarifying. But what we were worried about is that if we found and uncovered something that was critical and we didn't have this agenda topic, that we'd have to wait yet another month to get something answered. So this was just kind of some insurance. But with that, Warren, I'll turn it over to you, and you can just let us know if you.
Yeah, no, that's good to know that we retain the flexibility we were hoping for, and we haven't run into any roadblocks with the software. The one thing that you said that I was not sure of, I didn't think we had agreed that we wanted the heating and cooling days on there.
I have that on the January 22nd meeting and it was in the minutes, kind of in the group decided on that. So that's where I was grabbing that one from.
I think we have temperature on the existing graph, and
Right.
I think it was just, we were going to retain that if we could. I don't think we had strong opinions on it.
Well, let's see what it looks like. I won't revisit it now. I just tend to think it's one more thing that just clutters up the bill. People know that January is colder than June, and January has more heating and cooling days than November. But in any case, let's leave that for the moment. Any other questions or comments for Jason on this?
I was just gonna chime in and say I would second Warren on that. Just the simpler that we can make this bill, the more just the information people need to adjust their behavior and get a lower rate. We want everybody to be paying less, and so that they end up loving this rate. So any additional information that could potentially add confusion, I would vote to it.
Hey, Bianca, thank you. You know, that's a great lead in into our next topic, which is how we're going to communicate time of use rates so everybody knows how to reduce their costs and how so everybody does end up loving the new system. So Jason, let me turn it back to you.
Sure, thank you. Let me just share my screen. All right, can everybody see this?
Yep,
Great.
you got it.
So I will say that in the packet for this meeting, you'll find this presentation along with the actual kind of written Word document of our communication plan, which is, you know, it's broad and not incredibly specific. It doesn't have all the specific messaging that we would use, but it definitely the different ways that we'll be communicating with people. So if you want to look at this in more detail, I welcome people to review the packet and provide feedback on the more specific plan. But this is kind of an overview of what we are thinking. So we do know that the success of this is going to, be in proportion to how well educated people are about this, because this is going to represent kind of a dramatic shift in how we are charging for electricity. And the more people are educated, the more of these things that you'll see, which is that people know how to save money on their bills, and they are less likely to be concerned about the change and perceive it as positive. And that means fewer calls for Donna and Carol to have to wield with people not understanding what has happened to their bill. So that is definitely our goal, and we are one of the takeaways from talking to the other public power agencies who've implemented default opt-out time of use rates is that the simpler and more educated people are, the more successful your program is. So we definitely know that this is important. So our key objectives here are very simple, right? Make sure people know that this is happening, explain why it's happening, and then let them understand what they can do to impact their bills. You know, as Bianca said, hopefully people can shift some of their usage away from the peak and save money. Not everybody's bills, not everybody can shift every kilowatt hour away from the peak, and we're mindful of that, but hopefully people have some control over their usage and can shift it away from the peak and save themselves and all ratepayers money due to avoided costs for the plant. So those are our high level objectives. So tools are a very big part of this because you can certainly tell people it's happening and tell people why it's happening, but we also owe it to them to make sure that it's easy for them to understand how they can actually do this. And so some examples are side-by-side bill examples, and these are not necessarily, we're not saying that we're going to send a side-by-side bill to everybody. We've heard that that has gone really bad because there's mass confusion over which bill do I have to pay and is this real? Even if it's marked sample all over it, people are paying sample bills, but we can include graphics that show side-by-side bills so people can see, okay, here's this person and when they use their load before time of use, here's when they used it after, and then maybe even a third one, if you shift, your load in these ways, here's your third bill. So people can see like, okay, here's what I'm starting at, here's what I'm going to, and then here's what it could be if I, make some small changes. Also, we have bill calculators, and these could basically, like you see on the screen, allow people to express what load they have and then show them what their bill is now, what it could be if they're not using those things in the peak. This is just one of the samples that we found. And then the third one is load management programs. So these are programs that people can enroll in to not have to think or do anything. They can receive a credit on their bill initially, maybe before time of use rolls out, and then based on enrollment, they're going to see a lot less, peak usage for these things, and then their bills will go down. And these load management programs can have to do with thermostats or electric car charging, the cars themselves, and other smart appliances. We're hopefully going to be able to announce to the board very soon that we are going to be able to offer a program like this to ratepayers before time of use, so that people can start getting prepared for time of use and make sure that these systems have an impact once the rate structure changes. When it comes to the communication methods, there's a few on the screen here, and I'll just touch on each of these, but we do obviously have bill inserts for those people who still receive paper bills. Keep in mind that if you don't, you can still view all of your bills in SmartHub with all of the attachments and notices there. We also do have a messenger component to SmartHub that can proactively send out alerts like this to customers for their related to billing. Obviously, social media. We're thinking of holding some workshops and webinars, and these are opportunities for people to really ask questions and engage with them. We're thinking things like the First Friday at the League. We're thinking events at the Senior Center and other community gatherings where we can just get the word out so that people know what's happening and they can ask questions like, why is this happening? What does it mean for me? Email campaigns, obviously, that we can send out to people. Things like the news and notices blast, which is about 1,600 people. We have our constant contact list of all the people who've been in touch with the light plant. The website, obviously, and then word of mouth and events like this where we're talking about it. I think anybody who's attended a light board meeting knows that this is coming, but as you know, the vast majority of people do not attend all the meetings. I have a slide here with some examples of some social media posts that other MLPs have done. Just, I think once we have more of the details of the cost of service study, our campaign will kind of be in full swing, kind of midsummer. And that's when these messages need to come out on a regular basis, because people will tune out 7/8 of these things that are coming through their news feeds or on social media, but eventually they'll see one that go, oh, this is interesting. I'm a graph person, so these numbers and colors look nice to me. Or this is a very simple graphic just telling me that time of use is coming, and bring me to a landing page. I mentioned the workshops and webinars. We've heard that these have been pretty successful. And reaching those people who are not on social media, or people who are not on those webinars and are on the email lists and things like that. So it is important to try to reach everybody, all the residents who are going to be impacted by this. So we're committed to trying to do that. We mentioned the QR code before, and that's another way that we can make sure that there's a simple landing page where it can take people to SmartHub if they want to drill into their bill more, or it can show them with easy tools like hovering over a certain area of your bill, like what does this mean? Why is this here? What are the different buckets? Some challenges that we know we'll face, or questions that we have to ask, are the timing. Starting early sounds good, but we've heard that 6 months is really kind of the sweet spot for giving people enough time to understand that the change is coming without them forgetting that the original wave of messaging that went out. And if you start too early, you don't have a lot of the details about cost, and that's what most people want to know. So if you start messaging prior to having any idea of what rates will be, just knowing that the peak is expensive, for the simple message, that's great. But we live in a very engaged community where people have they operate at a discourse level that's very high, and they have expectations of details and facts and figures. And so if we just say rates will be higher at the peak, they're going to say, well, how high? And we're going to say, well, we don't know yet, but check back in 3 months or 4 months. So the timing is important. And then just being accurate with information, and letting people know where we are in the process. There is going to be a challenge for some people in shifting. Either they don't want to, or they can't, or what they do in their life just isn't conducive to shifting away from the peak, and so that will be difficult. And then the complexity. We've talked a lot about this, but there is this balance between complexity and accuracy that we're trying to strike, where things are simple enough for people to understand, but they're matched close enough with the actual cost of power that it's a meaningful charge, and not just something that we're trying to change behavior and change the rates. We're really trying to peg this to our actual costs that we incur, because some people are incurring costs for the entire system with their usage, and instead they could be benefiting the entire system by shifting away from the peak. So that's really the last slide I had, and I thought you know, it would be great to have a discussion and get feedback if anybody's reviewed the plan in the packet or has thoughts that we could take away from this. We'll definitely take notes and make sure to incorporate it.
Any questions or comments for Jason? I mean, it's great that you're starting to plot this out, and it is good that you've been looking at what other utilities have done in making this transition, but it is important to get this right. Anybody? I had a couple comments, but I'll let others weigh in. Chris?
I got a quick one. On the list of places to reach out to, I didn't see the Concord Bridge, which is our free local paper that we get now. And I know a lot of people read that. So I think that's a good opportunity there to get something that maybe is a little more detailed than some of the other outreach might be.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, this is great detail on the communication plan, and it's very much appreciated. The reason we're doing this is to lower expenses and lower cost. I know there are some environmental benefits for being off the peak, but I don't want that to be the top line communication. I want it to be focused on empowering customers to save money, because when they save money, the light plant saves money. This is all about lowering people's bills. A lot of people are going to see an on-peak price of 35 cents, 50 cents, and freak out and say, every hour of 24 hours a day is going to cost me 50 cents a kilowatt hour, and my bill is going to quadruple. So examples of, a steady load across 24 hours is the same price under both systems, the flat and the time of use. But if you load shift, and if you charge your car in the evening, and even though you've lost EV miles, you're still going to save money because you're going to be doing TOU in off-peak times, and you're going to have the option to do on-peak times. You're just going to pay for it. Those are the key things that we're empowering customers to lower their bills, and by doing so, it saves everyone money. And that's the point of this, not the environmental necessarily.
Yeah. I think those economic messages are the right things to lead with. I think you're right, Brian. John?
Yeah, no, I really want to reiterate what Brian said, and hats off to staff in terms of what they put together. But Brian, I think we really need to frame it just as you have, in terms of empowering customers to lower their costs. Not everyone's costs are going to be lowered, right? If someone doesn't change their behavior and they're consuming a lot of electricity on peak, their bill is going to go up. So I just think we have to be careful in terms of the expectations that we create. And it really is about, empowering customers. But as part of that, expecting that there's going to be behavioral change.
Thank you, John. One thing I wonder about, and this is a question for the staff, will we be able to keep track on a monthly basis of how many customers' bills have gone down because of time of use rate? Because I think the issue is, for those customers whose bills go up, they're going to assume that everybody's bill's going up, and they're going to be unhappy about that. And it would be nice for us to be able to say, out of X number of customers in the month of January, Y number of people saw their bills go down, and then us track that also to see over time, are we getting more people to adjust their electricity use so their bills go down as well?
That's a good question. I think sounds complex because their usage could be vastly different, and they may be shifting it in real time too, because they're going to get their first bill and go, oh, my rates did go up. So maybe I'll do my dishwasher this month and do the 4-hour delay or something. But Carol, do you have any sense, or Donna, do you have any sense on if that's something that we could actually calculate over time to see?
I don't know, I guess is my answer. At this point, we'd probably have to do some research on it and talk with NISC to see if they have any suggestions within the billing system. But off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
I mean,
in
if it's really overly complex, then it's not worth doing. But if it's something that's not so hard to do, it would be worth doing, partially for communication with customers. But presumably, we also want to know whether our transition to time of use rate is having a positive impact on the ratepayers or not.
In aggregation, I think it will be easy to see. It may be a longer period of time that we'll
Yeah.
be seeing that, but in theory, over time, you'll see kilowatt hour usage increase gradually, but total amount of revenue collected be lower because our costs are lower in procuring that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jason. In aggregate, we'll be able to see that because I think about degree days. One June might be very pleasant and the next June might be very hot. And, comparing the two requires degree days. And then when you try to do customer specific, it gets real complicated real quick. I did want to make another comment, which is not only do we need this communication plan, but we really need to make sure that the smart hub has the tools customers will need when they want to actually empower and engage. I know that I find the smart hubs interface and downloads to be too GUI, too pre-thought out for me. I'd rather just get raw meter data on, I'm consuming this much for each hour increment throughout the year and get it in an Excel file and do my own comparison. And I don't seem to be able to do that easily with Smart Hub. I don't know if I'm using the wrong download, but it creates comma separated files that are not user friendly when you get them out downloaded. So it's a detail thing. But if you tell customers that they're empowered and they want to take action, the first thing they're going to do is go to Smart Hub and start using all those tools. And we need to kind of brute force test those tools with some customers to see if they're actually meeting their needs.
Yep, we can look into this.
Yeah. But this is a great communication plan. I think this is great detail.
Yeah, we do need to have it so that customers can get the information they want and to calculate things. But I almost bet that the majority of customers are not going to be downloading and manipulating Excel files of their hourly electricity use. But maybe I'm wrong.
It's a vocal 200 or so customers out of the 8,000 that will be doing so. I know I'll be one of them, and I've got friends that do it as well. So
Yes.
I can see 1, 2, 3, at least 3 or 4 of our audience are going to do that.
Yes, good point. Okay, anything else anybody has on this topic? Okay, let's then go to the cost of service study. And Jason, for the benefit of Chris and others who might be new on the board, if you could explain what the cost of service study is and why we do it.
Yeah, sure. Why don't I turn that over to Laura? And Laura, would you feel comfortable explaining that, or would you like me to?
Hello, Chris. Laura Scott. I work on power supply and energy management matters. Are you familiar with a cost of service study?
Sorry, I got to come off mute. I think I understand the basic concept, but tell me as much as you want to tell us.
Okay, I'll pretend like you don't know anything. That way we won't skip anything. How's that sound? But it won't take long. So basically, we're a nonprofit business, right? We don't make any money. We incur expenses and then we allocate those expenses to our customers. So the cost of service study is a way to scientifically allocate those costs based on customers' load profiles, because load is what incurs costs. We have demand-related costs that are dependent upon the peak load, and we have variable per kilowatt hour costs that are based on usage. And so what we typically do is bring a third-party consultant who's expert in doing these cost of service studies to come in. They review all our costs. They look at the load of each customer class, and they come up with an allocation methodology that says, okay, the residential customers, we need to collect this amount of money from them. We need to collect a second amount of money from small commercial, medium commercial, basically for every rate tariff we have. They'll come up with a revenue requirement. And so we then take that revenue requirement and create rates that will collect that revenue requirement. So what we're in the process of doing this year is going out to get this third-party consultant. The last one we did was in 2018, which is some time ago. And so it's really overdue to be doing it anyway, but we wanted to wait until we were going to do the time of use rollout because we knew this was coming, and we thought, this is the time to bring in the expert to help us craft these new rates. So if I could share my screen, Jason, am I allowed to do that?
Yep, I just changed the setting to allow you.
Okay, so I'm going to share this. And can you now see?
Yep, we see it now. It's very small.
Yeah, I'm working on it. How's that?
Yep.
Okay, so what we're preparing to do, and we want to get your feedback on, is not conducting a formal RFP because that would take ages, but rather our plan is to outline a scope of work, send that scope of work to a number of known reliable experts in this area to get some competition for pricing, but not open it up to any company, that sees it in the paper and wants to respond. And so what we're proposing to do is issue this tomorrow, if we get agreement from you today, because we want to get this rolling. The proposals would be due by the end of the month, and we would quickly select our preferred vendor and have them begin work on April 9th. We want a fixed price or not to exceed price to help us compare the proposals that we receive. And so I won't go through the scope of work too much in too much detail, but it's basically asking them to conduct the study in order to determine if our current rates fairly represent their present cost of service levels for each customer class. And if not, what is it what we should be collecting for each customer class, and come up with a plan to move us from where we are now to where the consultant feels we need to be. The main idea of this cost of service study in the very beginning is we've mentioned that we've completed installation of our advanced metering system, and that we can now have hourly data. And we are going to transition all of our residential customers from an inclining block rate to an opt-out default time of use rate. And so, one of the responsibilities of the consultant is going to be to propose prices for the time of use periods. Some of this other stuff is just detail you probably don't need to know. It basically says, consider all of our costs, use industry accepted methodologies for allocating those costs, recommend which costs should be recovered through a fixed charge and which through a variable charge. And then here's the key: propose the rates for all customer classes that meet the following objectives. Number one, the opt-out time of use rate default for all residential customers. Propose the number of daily periods by season if appropriate and the prices for each. Design the residential opt-out rate following the principles of cost causation. Develop both residential and commercial solar net metering rates that assign utility costs to customers with solar generation, that fairly assign costs, compensate them for the value they provide, and encourage further solar adoption. I specifically put in here to review the history of the ETS off-peak rate and determine if the objectives of this rate will be met by the new residential time of use rate. They can weigh in on this, but really this is going to be a board policy decision, right? We've discussed it a little bit in the past. No decision has been made, but we will need to make one at some point. They also need to recommend the appropriate compensation amount for those customers who allow CMLP to control their water heaters. And we want to encourage heat pump technology in electric vehicles. So the deliverables, I want them to come here for at least a day so we can make sure we go through each one of our rates so that they fully understand it, and all of our costs. And we want them to deliver the model to us so we can use it. We're going to write some reports and then going to have a presentation to the board. So here's the timeline that I'm proposing. They begin work on April 9th. The results of the cost of service study would be due on May 12th, and a few weeks thereafter, their proposed rates would be due. We have a first draft report at the beginning of June. They present that report to the folks at CMLP, who give feedback that they incorporate into a second draft report. And then finally, they would present to the board at the July 9th meeting. And after that, they could close the report by incorporating any feedback from the board by July 23rd. The other thing I really want you to weigh in on is, this is the fixed price proposal form, page down. Here's just some information about CMLP to help them understand who we are. And then I've asked them to make sure the rates meet the CMLP board objectives. And so I've taken the liberty of writing these objectives for you. But this is the place where I would really like you to have a look at these and see if that this is an accurate representation of what you're trying to accomplish, or if we need to modify this. Do you want me to read through all of them?
No, I think we could read them on screen, but just
Okay.
give us a minute.
All right.
Got a spelling on item 5.
That's the British spelling. Westminster. Bedminster.
Oh, you know what I think happened here? I think it's supposed to be,
Should be administer like at the beginning.
rates should be easy to understand. They should be easy to administer and be explainable to the customer. So
Works.
what am I supposed to be doing here?
It was
You-
SNI, but it's fixed now.
It fixed.
Oh, still has an underline, but
Oh, that's a grammar underline, but it was had a spelling underline before.
Okay, well, any questions or comments on any of this? Bianca?
Yeah, the one thing I don't see here is the cost to the customer. We see equity protecting low-income users, but I think, one of the primary, well, there's a lot of reasons that people love municipal utilities, but I would say one of the primary reasons, if you ask anybody, it's just the cost, right? So we're not going to be charged exorbitant prices. And I don't see that here listed as, it said defendable rates should be fair and reasonable, but fair and reasonable is, I would like to see something in there that says that the rates should be as low as possible, given these other demands.
okay. I'm just gonna write myself a note.
I'm taking notes.
Okay, John?
Yeah, just a couple comments. Maybe Laura, if you could go back to the ETS rate.
In the scope,
Yeah.
Yes.
okay.
recognizing that this is an area of sensitivity, and I think it's good that you've identified it here. But I'm just wondering, if at the end of that, whether it be appropriate after it says, and determine if the objectives of this rate will be met by the new resident, and possibly at the end of that say, and if not, to propose a transition strategy.
I would add to John's comment on the ETS about the value load control brings. What is a reasonable incentive to offer them for the load control function?
Okay.
I don't know how to phrase it within your language there, but
Conceivably, that could be an element of the objectives identified below, right? As part of the development of the study, they should be quantifying the benefits of the load control.
yeah, it might need to be its own line item to say when we have load control of hot water heaters, ETS, or other devices, what value should we provide the customer?
Are you proposing to put that in the objectives? Or in the scope, like where we were?
I don't know. I'm reading this right now, so I don't know whatever you feel makes sense.
Well,
as
John,
I
did you?
would say put it in the scope, not under the board
Okay.
objectives are more general.
Yeah.
John, did you have something else?
Yeah, with respect to the schedule, Laura, can you go there?
Yeah,
Very aggressive.
It's
Yes,
very
I know
aggressive
that.
schedule. As a board member, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to get an interim briefing. I realize once everything is baked, and we're getting, final recommendations, there's really more limited opportunity to influence things. And I feel like there are going to be some critical policy decisions that are made that will be appropriate for the board to weigh in on. So I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity for conceivably at the June board meeting for a presentation on kind of preliminary results.
What's the date of the June board meeting, Jason?
Getting that. It is June 11th.
So yeah, I think we could, I'm asking them to come up with findings from their quantitative study, right, before the beginning of June. So I think there would be an opportunity to, you want the board to see it earlier.
Yeah, I very much agree with what John's saying here is if the only time the board sees the report is 14 days before it's going to be finally submitted, that really doesn't give us any time for input. At that point, it's really just thumbs up and thumbs down. And if necessary, there's nothing sacred about the date of that June board meeting. We could move the June board meeting later into June if that would, move it a week later. if
Or have a
necessary.
second meeting that just focuses on.
Or just a second meeting, yeah.
I was going to suggest the second meeting because it is going to be a long discussion of detail.
Well, I mean, you could have a second meeting, however, that still doesn't give them a ton of time to make changes before the July meeting. So I think the earlier we could do it in June, the better.
But the July meeting could also be a second meeting in July where it's not
Yes.
the 9th, it's the, or we just move that meeting a week.
Yeah,
So remember, what we're trying to accomplish here is to determine the specific rates, the levels of the rates, so that we can begin our communications plan to the customer in earnest and really tell them what the rates are going to look like. So the sooner we can get this information from the consultant and finalize it, the sooner we can get the word out to the customers. and start programming our system to generate bills. We had talked about doing a little, not a pilot, but a sampling of customers, volunteers, in the fall to test out the billing and make sure before we try to roll it out to everybody that things are working.
Are you
So
ready to do?
Why don't
I
we
gotta-
just make the executive can just be the board? And we'll do, or I don't want to put presentation board because that makes it sound like it's the final. I guess I can call,
You could do board input,
Preliminary presentation or.
And
I think the other thing is we can finesse the schedule if the board tells us what input they want along the process. So if the board says, first do this and then, give us an opportunity to weigh in, then do this and give us an opportunity, we can make sure that those fit in the timeline. Because we may also reach out, find a vendor, and then they say, well, we can't do this date, we can't do that date, we can do this earlier, but we have to do that later or something. So I think our takeaway is like, what does the board need? So that they feel comfortable that there's adequate opportunity to weigh in at various points, and then we can make sure that that happens. So first, I think the takeaway is after their quantitative review, before they get into any of the decision-making process, like what are their findings? And then a second draft report would be in writing. Is that the next one?
yes.
Okay. And does the board want something, again, then after they've taken the board's thoughts into consideration?
Well, that's what they'd be presenting at the July meeting, I would imagine.
Yeah, but I would assume that that's probably not many changes will happen, or do you still think there's an opportunity to make modifications between the 9th and the 23rd?
I mean, I think if the draft comes to the board as well as the staff, and we
Yeah.
have an opportunity to review the draft and submit questions and comments so that when the board presentation occurs, there's already been, the board has reviewed the thing.
I think that's definitely doable. That can be, the second draft report can be distributed to all the board members, on June 30th, and then you'll have
Good.
a few days, at least a weekend to review it.
And this assumes that there would be a prior presentation of results to the board.
On the 11th.
Great.
Okay, that's great feedback. Thank you.
I have one more piece.
Okay, Franco, then I had a
The board goals, I would like to propose that we put in there that we want to see, one of our goals is to really kind of show the cost of distribution and pass through costs separately. So the cost to run the plant versus the cost that we just pass on to customers fairly. I want to make sure that's separated in this rate clearly from the expenses that go into the calculations to the way the bill is presented. That way people know what they're paying for the light plant and what they're buying as generation capacity and transmission.
Do you want to propose at some point, not right this second, Brian, but just maybe today or soon, a bullet point and the wording that you'd like to see?
I can send that to you, but yeah, it'd
Okay.
basically say that we want to make sure that delivery is delivery through this process and that power supply is power supply through this process.
Does the rest of the board agree with that, adding that objective?
That was in our TOU discussions, but I don't see it here.
It's okay with me, I think.
Yeah, it's fine with me. I think that we need to be careful in terms of there's power supply, and some resources aren't going to avoid all power supply costs. So there needs to be, we just need to be careful there. But I'm assuming that's something that we'll have plenty of opportunity to kind of weigh in on.
Yeah.
So I had two issues here. One, the way this historically, we've over collected from commercial customers and have given benefits to residential customers of that over collection. The way you wrote this cost of service study, it seemed like you're talking about changing that completely, and that it's a requirement that there would be no over collection from commercial customers.
I guess the way I was thinking about it, Warren, is that I would like to know, and I think the board should know, the actual cost to serve each customer class. That doesn't mean that we're going to develop rates that exactly collect that, but I think we should do that with eyes wide open.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, but the way I looked at your charge at the beginning, it was not just saying that we wanted that information, but that they then should propose rates that matched that cost of service for different customers, and that there wouldn't be an opportunity to consider cost shifting from commercial to residential customers.
Okay, I will look into that and fix it.
I did
That's,
see at the end
that's-
board objectives of continuing rate philosophy, which suggests that there's a desire from the board to make sure that nothing is a radical shift in terms of the philosophy. But as Laura said, we can go back and
Yeah, so take a look at that. And then the other one I had,
Warren, that's setting revenue requirements. So they can set a revenue requirement for residents that is slightly lower than it should be and slightly higher for commercial customers. Then the rates are set to meet that requirement.
yeah, that's maybe okay. I mean, at least the way I was reading this very quickly, was assuming that they did not have an option to propose that or to propose several possibilities, but that the only option was to present rates that reflect the actual cost to each class of customers. Then the other thing here is, we've been talking about in many different discussions that with time of use rates, there's going to be a trade-off between accuracy and simplicity in terms of the rates. By asking them to only propose one set of rate tariffs, we've basically punted that decision of where to draw the line between accuracy and simplicity. We've punted that to the cost of service consultants, whereas it would be nice to ask them to propose rate tariffs for all customer classes that meet objectives, giving with one being to be as accurate as possible and one to maximize simplicity of communication with customers, or at least that they would give us a couple of different options of how to do it.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking, Warren, that I would like to know what the consultant would recommend based on their experience with other utilities and how others have balanced this trade-off between accuracy and simplicity. So I'd like to know their opinion.
Yeah, I'd love to
We
know their
can-
opinion too, but as long as we're given information in a format so that if we don't agree with their opinion, we have the information to do something slightly different.
Yeah, I think we,
So that we're not a situation where they come in and they say, well, we propose 5 different rate periods over the course of the day. And we say, well, wait, that's way too many. People aren't going to understand that. And we don't have the information to do anything different than that.
now I understand that you will have an opportunity to request different different rate design
Okay.
than they're thinking. right? They're just gonna
Okay.
tell you what their opinion is. We come back and we say, gee, that's great. We see your opinion and can you try these other ones?
Okay, sounds good.
I would also add that we have talked about seasonal rates. 8 months for winter and 4 for summer. And I didn't see any seasonal mention in this, but then again, I'm just seeing what's on screen and maybe it's
Yeah,
some.
there is,
Yeah,
but
so
there is a reference in here. And what I would propose to do, since you all are seeing this for the first time, is, we certainly should circulate this, Jason, to give people, the time at their leisure to kind of read through it, because people may have some other thoughts and comments than what have already been brought up today. The other thing I want to mention is, because we've been talking about simplicity versus accuracy, the decision the board made to not develop a separate solar tariff, but to embed the solar tariff within the time of use rates is going to add to complexity. I mean, that decision, I hope everyone understands that, is on board with it. You've made a decision in favor of complexity over simplicity, because we are going to need more buckets to accurately allocate costs. I'm thinking probably at least 5.
Yeah, well, we will see. I mean, the way it was left, we wanted to see the results. We may then want to revisit that and go towards more simplicity after we see that, but we'd
Okay.
like to at least see what it looks like to do it accurately.
Fair enough.
Any other well, the question, it seemed like given your timeline, you need comments back from us ASAP, right?
Well, I can change that. This is what I try to reach for the sky here and then come back down to earth. So that was what I wanted to do, but if we need to adjust it, then we will.
how much time does the board, would they like with the document to provide feedback? 2 days? Is that enough?
I can't do it today, but I could do it tomorrow.
So maybe by Friday,
Yeah.
by
That
Friday morning.
anybody would want more time than by Friday to take a look at that?
Well,
Okay.
yeah, you guys can all respond to the email we send out and then let us know when
Okay.
so yeah, we'll
But it would be nice to keep as closely as we can to Laura's timetable on this so that we don't hear back from all these vendors, oh, this timetable is too aggressive, we can't do it. John?
Yeah, just a question. And I haven't looked at this closely enough. I don't know if you've kind of enumerated the different rates that we'd be looking for, but one thing that I think that we might want to consider is various Massachusetts utilities have implemented rates for heat pumps. And recognizing that there is, it seems like that's an objective of Concord to kind of promote the adoption of heat pumps. That's something that we might want to consider here if there's a need to signal that to the consultant that's performing the cost of service study.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I am fiercely opposed to special incentive rates. So I think what the state is doing is what we did in 2009 and created the 35 rates that we had at one point that in 2015 we started cutting back and has created lots of headaches and lots of unintended consequences. And so the expense-based TOU rate and load control is trying to do the incentive without specific technology. So
I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, Brian. I just wondering if it's something that we would ask the consultant to look at. And I agree, we don't want to create another ETS rate. We want to create rates that are, reflective of kind of costs.
right, because you have to meter the device, which is a huge cost compared to the program. It cascades with expenses and other hurdles. So
We
I'd rather
do,
I'd
yeah,
rather see us give a rebate or other kind of things outside of rates to incentivize those things, because those are great things to have, but I think we should use those other mechanisms.
We do get quite a few questions from prospective heat pump adopters about a special heat pump rate. I get them all the time from the Energy Management Division. And so it is a major consideration and a concern for those who are considering adopting heat pumps.
Sorry, Laura, let me, I'd rather see like you register that you have a heat pump, you get a $5 a month credit, something, an incentive like that, rather than embed it into the rate where you have to then meter the device and do all these other things and put it into the billing system, taking up line items and so forth.
What I would propose to do in the study, Brian, is ask the consultant to look at the actual cost to serve heat pumps. My opinion is that it's actually much higher to serve heat pumps than it is the residential load because of the correlation with degree days. But that's my opinion, and it would be nice to have a third party tell us, is it cheaper to serve them or more expensive? And then the board, with that information in hand, could decide, okay, do we want to nevertheless provide an incentive in the form of a monthly credit or some other way? But I think it would be helpful to have that information.
I agree.
Okay, let's leave it there because we have other things we have to get to today. We'll have an opportunity on the board to review this document and respond. We're going to be going into executive session in a few short minutes, so I want to turn things over for public comments, but before public comments, see whether we have any comments from our select board or finance committee liaisons.
Nothing specific. So just, I think it's a good meeting. Lots, I know lots of different discussions here on the rates, but I think the board's focused in on a lot of important topics. So just thanks everybody. I don't have any specific feedback.
Okay. Good. And I saw Colin on the call before, but I don't see her now. Any public comments? Great. Well, we are going to be going into executive session then, and I am looking for, because we have a matter that involves proprietary contract information, and I need a motion from somebody on the board, and Jason has very kindly given us a cheat sheet of what the motion should say. Does somebody want to make it?
Sure. I move that we enter an executive session under exemption 10 of the open law meeting for the sole purpose of discussing trade secrets or confidential proprietary information regarding activities by a governmental body as an energy supplier, which would adversely affect conducting business relative to other entities, making, selling, or distributing energy. We will adjourn directly from executive session and not return in open session.
So do we have a second?
Second.
Brian. Okay, and John?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Bianca?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. We will move into executive session.